Hey guys, welcome to a new series on Planning Dirty Academy, which is going to be called Opening Moves. And the idea here is that I had a lot of people asking about how do you go from the client brief? What are the first things you do from a client brief getting to a creative brief? And I thought an interesting series might be is hearing other strategists ways and approaches that they attack a client brief. Opening moves, kind of like the opening moves of a chess kind of chess game, and that's kind of where I got the idea. First guest is guest lecturer, I guess guest teacher is Dakota Green, who's a ex-strategist from Droga 5, now freelance strategist, and we've got him on today. So Dakota, I've given you the brief. I've given you the background of what we're going to do. I thought we'd just jump right into a problem and hear how you would attack it. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds good, man.
Awesome. So the assignment that I have got for you today is I would love to hear how you would respond to this client brief. So the brand is PBR, the much loved hipster beer brand. And if you don't know, the light beer category is dropping significantly. It's dropped 3.1% in 2017 and continues to drop. The light beer category is really struggling to recruit new beer drinkers. The younger demographic is not drinking the beer. PBR was really popular with hipster hubs. And so they kind of rode a big wave in like 2012 to 2015 because they were the dollar beer, they were the cheap beer with an interesting kind of history. However, now the market's saturated with those dollar beer alternatives with kind of niche stories. So the brand PBR is looking for a campaign that will help us recruit new drinkers to the brand. So I'd love to hear, if a client gave you this information, how would you spend the first 24 hours? And hypothetically, you've got 4 days to write a creative brief to Briefing Creatives. What would you do?
Yeah. So I think the most important thing for me with this one would be trying to understand the actual problem from the client's perspective first, understand what's in their mind, getting all the research that they might have from it, like start getting the research because it might take part of the 24 hours, it might take the full 4 days. Try and get everything that I could from them, because I think understanding what their priorities are, how they're measuring things, how they see their problem in more detail is always probably one of the more important things for me. And then while I wait for that, I'd generally just start with what's going on with beer, where the innovation's happening. I always like to go to Trend Hunter, as silly as that might sound, and just literally just go down in a rabbit hole. The first thing that I do with every project when I'm starting like the desktop research phase is basically just copy and paste, duplicate a deck that I've been working with for like years.
Yeah.
And it's a headline across the top with, some smaller text off to the left, and then room for images on the right. And I literally everything I read, I write a headline, I take an excerpt and I copy and paste the link, and then I try and later, or while I have, if I come across, as I come across them, I drop images. And I just do that with anything. So if it's a client document that shows like equities falling in cool or something, or like it's dropping in cool but it's rising in value, I'd put those two slides off to the right. I'd put a little red box around both the incline and the decline, and then I'd make a note to myself in the headline. Any text that they have in that document, I would copy paste it in the left. Similarly, if I find something on Trend Hunter, I start with the images, and I just drop images on the right and write headlines about them, and I just keep moving and moving, and I go through, generally what I think is happening in like culture, what I think is happening in the category, anything that's written about the brand, I look up, and then I try and get a feel for who the consumer is, or who the growth audience might be in the process. For this, I think this particular challenge, my like knee-jerk reaction would be to try and get to the hipster hubs, remotely from my desk, and chat with some of the bartenders, or like if I know anyone that's a beer rep or works in alcohol in those markets, or even in New York, that might know somebody or kind of is familiar with the industry. I would try and talk with the people who are serving beer, the people who are selling beer, or other alcohol products, and people who are drinking beer or other alcohol products, and try and understand what their relationship to Pabst is. And that's just like defining the consumer part. Once I have those inputs, I guess I would try and see if there's a way of constructing a media target, and see what sort of things are popping out in the syndicated data that we have available, to try and start building the case for it back to the client, if it's an audience that they're unfamiliar with.
Can you explain media target a little bit more? What were you meaning by the media target?
So you mean like which tools?
Yeah, what tools? Just the term media target, is that like all the consumers, or is it a certain segment? And how do you get to that?
I mean, for me, this is a tricky one because I think it could be debated. I think we can have a sort of like a creative or an influential target, which has a sort of subjective criteria. And then if we go to try and figure out what the larger size of any particular set of assumptions, the larger set of an audience based on any particular set of assumptions from the influencer group or from another group, we would go into a tool like Simmons, YouGov, and we would look for statements that we could construct them against, and then on the output of those statements, we would know kind of what the size of that audience is, and then what sort of things what are they over-indexing in?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. To rewind to the very first bit, I found it interesting that going and asking the client, like, just as a bit, treat me as a beginner. How would you go do that? Like, what are the questions I should ask them, or do I set up a 30-minute meeting with them, or how have you found to do this?
Well, it'd be pretty rare to get this slide as a brief, I would say.
Yes.
But you would get something like a piece of paper that had some words on it, defining very similar things. That could come in the form of a request for proposal, which I'm guessing this kind of a scenario is with 4 days sprint, probably for a pitch. In the RFP process, you don't necessarily get to ask the client for things directly. And maybe you're emailing back and forth with whoever's running the pitch process, third-party person. So you could write them and ask them for, say, a brand equity tracker, or a lot of the times these RFPs will say like no additional research will be provided to keep things equal. But if they don't say that, then you're able to ask for anything you'd like, even in a chat with the client directly, if you're so bold. But yeah, you can. I don't. It's hard to say exactly how you might go about asking for that research. You email the client, email the person running the pitch, request the information directly in the email, or request a phone call to discuss things. And then I would write like a discussion guide with a set of things I'm looking for, questions that I have after I've looked around a little bit.
Do you have any tips on like writing a discussion guide? That's putting you on the spot there, mate. I know. Yeah.
I'm still thinking about if I sound stupid talking about the media target.
No, you don't. It was, I actually, to go back to the media target, I actually totally understand what you mean, because the creative target, we often do like the single person, like, hey, this is, you know, Emma, the fitness guru, and she only drinks beer, blah, blah, blah. And you go really, really specific. And then the media target is just like the category of drinkers, like the whole amount who could potentially buy this product. And it will include Emma, the fitness guru, but it's going to include, like, you could just never target off that for media. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah. So the discussion guide, in that deck that I described, I generally have the first slide as just a place for questions.
Right.
And so I write down all the questions that I have after reading, in this case, a single slide. I write down all the questions I have, and then I start to look for inputs, and then I continue to write questions. Once you have, in the case of asking a client for research, once you have a set of questions that pertain to asking the client things, then you can structure like the grouping. So the first thing that you'd start with maybe is, let's say, brand tracking. Like, how do you measure the brand? How do you keep track of it? How do you know that coolness is dropping, if that was mentioned in the brief? Or if it's about audience, you could say, okay, so you mentioned that the beer was really popular with hipster hubs. How do you define hipster hubs? Who are the type of people that are hipsters versus drinkers? And just really just like group them, and then have a structured conversation and assign an amount of time. Because if you only have 30 minutes and you have 5 groups, there's going to be 5 minutes at the very beginning that you're just getting into it, and then you'll have those 25 minutes. So you need to be able to move between questions and between groups. It's I don't know that it's a science.
Yeah. No, it's cool to hear. And so now you've got all this, you've done your kind of like data. So it sounds like you probably have a really big presentation full of all these kind of insights. What do you do with it then to get to the creative brief?
Yes. So in the first 24 hours kind of thing, in this scenario, I don't have any organization other than the individual slides.
Yep.
And I just try and get as much collect as much raw information as I can, and don't overthink about the groupings or combining things. I just think individual thoughts, even if they're repetitive ones. And then maybe after the first 24 hours, then I go back through and just look for things that can be combined, or look for things that I actually sort of disproved, or found like they're not relevant anymore. So then I put them in the appendix or delete, depending on my mood. And I try and whittle that deck down into fewer slides, and bucket them into like, what's a consumer point, what's a culturally relevant point, what pertains to PAPS versus the category, and then what pertains to the category. And as I start to group those slides, then I start to form like a logic for how I see the category or how I see the consumer. And then, I just continue to, I guess, do that over and over again.
And it sounds like you're categorizing by the 4 C's, the consumer, culture, category, company.
Yeah.
Yep. And so then that is getting to is it like one insight per box, or you have multiple?
Yeah, I think, not every slide can be an insight. Some slides are, necessary transitions, I guess. But the goal, I guess, is to open each of those sections with some broader terms, and then end with a finer point, and combine those 4 points to come up with the strategy. And usually I'm not so shy about showing the 4 points, even if they're not refined, with some ideas about what the strategy might be, to a creative director on the account, or even just a friend that's not even working on this project, to get some gut feel on whether the logic is sound, if I've missed something really obvious, if the wording could be tweaked to be more interesting and provocative. I think the more you have to do you have to do the research and you have to really go deep and wide. But the sooner you can start working with creatives, the better, because that brief, especially in a pitch, needs to really just like snap onto what needs to be done quickly for creatives, because they have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
The 4 days work that we have to do.
Yeah. We're fast on our 4 days.
Yeah.
I love that. Anything else you think is relevant to kind of like attacking this problem? If you're starting out as a strategist, what would your advice be?
I think it's, at least for me in the beginning and even now, but the beginning part, it was really hard to know what I was looking for. And in a project like this, there's no real right answer. You just have to have tight logic and bulletproof it with the team and make sure that, you know, it stands. And I think that that's the real enemy of a 4-day project is doubt and what if, and not closing doors on things and running down like a path.
Yep. Love it. All right. Awesome. Thank you, mate, for answering this and taking us through your process. Super interesting.
I wonder if Portland is one of these hubs.
Yeah, it'd have to be one of the hubs. That's the OG. So I'd assume that would be where it all starts.
I remember the beers. $1.
Yes. Me too. All right. Thanks, mate.